Right now, you are taking a live look over Haifa there in Israel, as there are those continuing concerns about a major attack from Iran. Major cities there across Israel on alert. In the meantime, ceasefire talks picking back up today in Doha. Israel has sent a delegation to take part, but Hamas has insisted that it's going to skip the negotiations altogether. We'll keep you updated on any of those developments that come out of Qatar. The U.S. also calling for an immediate investigation by Israel into allegations of Israeli soldiers using Palestinian civilians as guinea pigs to test areas for any kind of hidden explosives. The State Department asked about that report from Israeli newspaper Haaretz, claiming Gaza civilians were being sent first into tunnels and buildings out of concern that they could be booby-trapped. A spokesperson for the U.S. State Department saying, quote, "We would urge Israel to immediately and transparently investigate these allegations and hold any potential perpetrators accountable." The Israel Defense Force is not denying any of it, but did say that conduct was, quote, prohibited, and it would investigate any such claims. Obviously, a lot to discuss here, so I do want to bring in a friend of the show, Alex Trayman, CEO and Jerusalem Bureau Chief at Jewish News Syndicate. As always, thank you so much, Alex, for taking the time to be here with us today.
Josh, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, first off, I do want to talk about these claims in that Israeli newspaper against the IDF. The U.S. was asked about it during their State Department briefing and said that if that were true, it's obviously not appropriate. They do want an investigation into that, and the IDF said that's what they're going to do. What do you make of those claims overall?
Well, I think it's important to note that even in the State Department's briefing, that they said that there was not necessarily any concrete indications that the report was true. So that's one aspect of it. Second of all, you have Palestinian terrorists that are dressed like civilians in Gaza. It could very well be that you had some kind of terrorist coming out of a tunnel and then trying to lure IDF soldiers in, and they just point the same person that just came out of there back in and said, go back in, to see if it's booby-trapped or not. And it doesn't mean that it's a civilian in that case. So we don't know if it's true. We haven't really heard any reports. The IDF hasn't said it's true, but the IDF does investigate these things. That's what makes the IDF different than Hamas, which is a terror organization. The IDF is continuously investigating the conduct of its soldiers and trying to hold its own soldiers to the highest standards of international law and the laws of war.
And on that same note, it is interesting to note, because we've heard various reports over the past several weeks of the different Hamas terrorists who are actually wearing the civilian clothes there and firing rockets, firing missiles there at Israel from those humanitarian areas, which, of course, they are surrounded by civilians and they're wearing civilian clothes. So it would be very difficult to distinguish.
Exactly. And that's part of the strategy, all along. And that's why Hamas is not telling you in their numbers, which are not reliable numbers to begin with. And we've seen, over the months how those numbers have changed, or even the UN has said, that they're reducing the amount of civilian casualties that they're being told. But Hamas never says, how many of its soldiers have been killed versus civilians, because there's ultimately very little way to tell the difference between a civilian and a soldier. And the soldiers are hiding amongst the civilians, hoping that as many civilians as possible will be killed. I mean, I know it's a cynical strategy and people don't want to believe it, but this is a terrorist organization that is out to defeat the state of Israel. They don't have the firepower to beat the IDF straight on in a military battle, and these are the tactics that they need to use in order to get a victory, and that comes through delegitimization.
I do want to talk about the ceasefire talks that are getting underway right now in Doha. We know that Israel, according to Netanyahu, is sending that delegation to discuss more about the ceasefire and hostage release deal, but Hamas has indicated they're not going to send anyone. So my question for you, is a deal even possible if Hamas is not there to negotiate?
Well, it seems as though Hamas is being represented in those negotiations, even if it's not sending its delegation. I mean, it's taking place in Doha. We know that Hamas's senior leadership has been living in Doha, under Qatari watch and safekeeping for many years. So they're definitely being represented in some way. But what incentive do they really have to reach a ceasefire? They're a terrorist organization. The second that this battle will be over, now they're going to have to pick up the pieces, and they're not going to be able to fight against the state of Israel. So, meanwhile, they don't have too much incentive. The question is whether Iran has the incentive to have a ceasefire reached. If Iran and Lebanon, and rather Hezbollah, are looking for a ladder to climb down over their threats to attack Israel, for which Israel would surely retaliate, in kind. If they are trying to avoid some kind of a major regional escalation, they may push Hamas, who's their terror proxy, to reach a ceasefire with the state of Israel.
This is being referred to by many folks out there, many experts, as a last chance deal. Why exactly is that?
Well, I think that when you look at the situation just between Israel and Gaza, this isn't a last chance at all. As long as there's hostages, there's going to be continued attempts to bring the hostages home, and negotiations is one of the proven methods. So Israel will continue to engage in negotiations. I think the United States is calling it a last chance for negotiations. A, to put pressure on Israel, but B, they're saying that that Iran and Hezbollah may attack Israel if a ceasefire is not reached. So basically, you have the threat of a major regional escalation here, and the United States has been holding Iran and holding Hezbollah off now, for a matter of days. They're basically saying that if these negotiations fall apart, that they don't think that they can hold Iran or Hezbollah back any longer.
Yeah, obviously a lot of questions about this and whether it really is, a last chance. But reports are indicating that Israel has drawn up a list of the 33 living hostages that would be released in the first phase of the ceasefire deal. Do we know how Israel goes about deciding who is included in that list? I assume, we're talking about the two Bebas children who are there. They're probably included in that in some way. How do they go about deciding?
The ones on the list, I think that first of all, that there is a lot of intelligence as to which hostages may be alive and which ones might be dead. So I think that Israel goes on the basis of some of this intelligence. But the 33 on the list are women, children, elderly, those that would be considered humanitarian cases, as opposed to those like Israeli soldiers or men of military fighting age that were taken hostages. Well, those individuals are not on the initial list of the first 33.
If a ceasefire deal here is reached, does that necessarily mean that Iran is not going to launch that major attack on Israel? Because they've said, of course, that is the plan. If there is a ceasefire hostage release deal that is reached there, they won't attack. But does that word really mean anything?
Well, the word doesn't really mean very much. I mean, remember, we had a ceasefire on October 6th, many ceasefires between Israel and Hamas, and Iran is the chief of the terror proxies in the region. But you might get a temporary peace. I mean, I think that's all that Israel would be hoping for. But essentially what that would be doing is kicking the can down the road. Iran is now a nuclear threshold state. They're on the edge of having a deliverable nuclear weapon. And this would just give time for Hezbollah to rebuild, potentially for Hamas to rebuild, and for Iran to race forward and complete their nuclear weapons and their deliverability systems. And we're hearing about all kind of replenishment efforts that Iran might be making for newer types of ballistic missiles. So this might give Iran the opportunity to plan for the next attack. Any ceasefire now that Israel would reach, even if it includes Iran and Hezbollah, is literally just kicking the can down the road till the next conflict.
One thing that stood out to me that we've heard through, again, various reports, Iranian officials claiming anonymously, so it's important to note that the U.S. actually presented Iran with a list of those Israeli Mossad agents that were involved in the assassination of Hamas's leader Ismail Haniyeh. Is there any reason to believe that the U.S. would actually do something like this and, I guess, let those names out there, especially when we're talking about allies of the U.S.?
Well, there's no confirmation from the U.S. government, which has called the report categorically false, and there's no confirmation from the Israeli government that they consider the report to be true. However, there have been numerous reports that the Iranians and the United States have been negotiating with the United States, trying to prevent Iran from launching this massive attack on Israel, both directly and via its proxy Hezbollah. And so, as part of these reports, we've heard some that the United States may choose to remove its remaining troops from Iraq and Syria. This is something like around 3,000 troops in the two countries, which would be, a major retreat on America's behalf in the Middle East, which would essentially cede that land over to Iran. And we've also heard these reports that the United States has given information on these Mossad agents. And now, it's not clear that the United States knows who the Mossad agents are or how they're operating there, but it could be part of a plan that the United States has to give Iran something that they want, and yet avoid this massive escalation to which then Israel would be forced to respond. So we keep seeing over and over again this pattern where the United States is doing whatever they can to prevent Israel from launching the next round of the attack.
All right. Alex Trayman there at the Jewish News Syndicate. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Well, I think that it's becoming more and more clear that Iran is the head of this terror snake. They're the ones that are pulling the strings in Gaza and Hamas. This has really never been, part of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think that the first reason why you can understand that that's the case is that you don't have a war between Israel and Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria. You don't have Israeli Arabs who believe themselves to be Palestinian, fighting against Israel inside Israel itself. It's only Hamas, which is one of Iran's terror proxies. We're definitely on the edge of a major regional escalation. I don't see any way in which this escalation is avoided. The question is the timing. The question is if it's going to happen now, if these ceasefire and hostage negotiations break down, or whether this is going to happen later, whether that's in 6 months from now, or whether that's in a year or 2 years from now. Unless Iran is stopped, and unless this regime is changed, and unless they're de-armed, specifically from developing nuclear weapons, there's always going to be a major threat of confrontation between Iran and the state of Israel.
All right. Alex Trayman, as always, thank you so much for being here with us today and breaking it all down. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, those talks do resume today in Doha, so we'll keep you updated right here on Live Now from Fox. Also, do want to take you out to this post that just came in from the Israel War Room, as they did say the IRGC, which is the Iran Revolutionary Guard there, terrorists announced the death of Ahmad Reza Afshari, a member of the Iranian IRGC's Air and Space Advisory Force in Syria, following airstrikes that were carried out by the U.S.-led coalition in eastern Syria.